guys, Work here, welcome back to the bench. So it's finally time to get tearing into our CZ SP01. Now, in all honesty, this is probably going to take me a couple of nights, so you guys got to give me a little bit of leeway here if this video seems jumpy at all. Also, if it seems like I'm repeating stuff, it's because I'm trying my best to get as much information in as I can so that I can break this up into specific segments on how to do each one of these portions. So let's go ahead and dive in. First thing we're going to do, drop the mag, safety check, and pull the slide off. Go ahead and set the slide to the side. And right now we're going to be primarily dealing with the lower. So to do this, let's go ahead and grab our screwdrivers. We're going to need a decent set of gunsmithing screwdrivers. A decent set of gunsmithing screwdrivers is always a good idea. A lot of them are specifically cut to reduce the risk of marring any of your fasteners. So the first thing, let's go ahead and remove the grips. Now I get a lot of questions on the grips on this handgun. These grips are from Cool Hands. Cool Hands is on Amazon, and these are just G10 grips, and I love them. They cost slightly less than VS grips, but the quality is on par. Alright, and with our grips and grip screws to the side, let's take a picture for the gram. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull out the hammer spring and the lanyard strut assembly. So what we're going to do here is we're going to slightly compress the hammer spring by pressing down on the lanyard loop assembly. Then we're going to go ahead and punch this pin out, and we'll lift slightly on the gun to be able to pull the lanyard loop and the spring out. So let's go ahead and take care of that. I'm going to grab my block for something to press it up against. So I'm going to sit it on my block and I'm going to push down, press the pin out. So with the punch still in, let's go ahead and pull our magazine brake out. And it's just a piece of spring steel that is slotted in here at the bottom. Push forward on it hard enough and it'll pop right out. Now we're going to push pressure down again. Remove our punch. And as we let up, you can see the lanyard loop and our hammer spring are going to come out. With those out, let's go ahead and push out the top pin and pull our magazine brake out. And let's take both of these pins. We're going to sit with the lanyard loop all together so that we know that those things go together. So now with those out, now we can come up here and do the safety. So the safety is kind of a pain from what I understand, and I believe it. So let me zoom in here and let me show you what we're looking at. So now we're onto the decocker, not the safety, I'm sorry, the decocker. And since this is a tactical model, we've got decockers on both sides. So if you look at the base of the right hand decocker here, you see that there's a notch here, and inside that notch is an arm. Now you can press on that arm, and what that's going to do is it's going to remove a detent that is attaching it to the shaft of the other side's decocker. So what we need to do is we need to depress this bar in here as well as pry this decocker out to be able to get this off. So I'm going to take a little bit of my tried and true blue paper towel. We're going to sit it right here on the frame. I'm going to take like a small watchmaker's screwdriver here. I'm going to press in slightly on that arm I was telling you about and pry up. And as I pry up, technically my decocker lever should come right off. Should being the key term. Okay, we're going to do this with a couple of different tools here. I'm trying not to mar the finish. I am getting this thing Cerakoted, so it's not the most important thing in the world, but I still don't want to tear my gun up, so. Okay, here it comes. Okay. And with that, it's off. Now what I ended up having to do was pushing in this lever while at the same time prying up with a screwdriver here. That ended up getting it off. So now with that off, we can go ahead and push the decocker through. So in order to get the decocker through, there's a small spring here that is in an indent in the decocker. So we're going to have to pull that spring slightly up and out of its seat. Once that's done, the decocker bar should pop right out the other side. I'm going to move my screwdriver. Now that spring is going to pop down in there, so we're going to have to pull that back up when we put everything back together. Okay, so now what we're looking at is the sear cage here. Now the sear cage is, on the decocker models, from what I understand, this is the biggest pain of anything to be able to get out of here. Now the reason is that we've got a whole bunch of tiny little components in here, and we don't want those tiny little components to fall out. That's reason number one. Reason number two is it's staked in. So we are going to have to fight a staking. Now, for those of you who don't know what a staking is, so what they do is they take the hole, and you've got the pin inside the hole. And what they do is they smash a little bit of the material on the side to keep that pin where they want it. So that keeps it from coming out. But what you have to do is to to get that pin out eventually, you actually have to force the material of the frame itself to the side, rather than just having to worry about pushing the pin out. That's where this guy comes into hand. So this is the starter punch that you get with the Cajun Gunworks kit. Now this punch is heavy, and along with a heavy hammer, we should be able to make short work of this. We're going to go ahead and find out. I got sleeping kids upstairs, so if it makes too much noise, I'm going to have to stop. But let's go ahead and give it a shot and see how far we get. So because it's staked on this side, we're going to end up punching it through from the right, this way. And all I'm going to do with this is we're going to get it started. And as soon as we get it started, we're going to stop with the starter punch, and we're going to use this. Now, what is this? This is a slave pin. What this pin is going to do is it's going to allow us to hold all of the internal pieces of this sear cage together so that we can take it out as one piece rather than having all these springs pop everywhere. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. We're going to get us a nice sturdy mount on the block. Let's go ahead and get our starter punch in there. Give it a nice solid whap. And with that, we are slightly through. So now we can go ahead and continue with our slave pin, making sure that we're over a hole in our block. Grab a good proper size punch here. This punch is a 3/32 punch. As soon as we are down in there, give it a couple more with this one. So here, you can see that we've got that main pin pulled out, and it looks like our sear is stuck. Go ahead and take a look in here. Maybe I need to push down on this a little bit. So I'm starting to really hate this camera. So it looks like you guys missed pretty much everything that just happened. So what I did was I pressed our slave pin through, and I went a little bit too far. And I couldn't back drive it, so when I just went ahead and took the entire sear cage out, it's all sitting in pieces in here, so I'm going to have to kind of piece all that back together. Now, the slave pin is still going to help because I'm going to be able to use that to assemble it outside of the gun to get everything back together. But in the meantime, it kind of sucks. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull the hammer out. Now the hammer is held in by a pin that's sitting back behind this little slave pin style here. Now this pin, if you give it a little bit of a shove, now that the sear is out, will come right out of a hole in the top, and make sure you keep it. Okay. So now that that pin's out, we should be able to grab a smallish punch and punch our hammer pin out through this side of the gun. And that should come out with no problem at all, and it does. And once that's out, we can remove the hammer, the strut, and our disconnector. Okay, so we're getting down to just the bare essential pieces here, aren't we? So the next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to pull out our trigger here. And to get the trigger out, we've got a single pin here that's going to go through that away. And this roll pin is in here pretty darn tight. So as with everything else, it's going to come out from the right-hand side over to the left-hand side. So let's get it mounted pretty solidly on our block. Let's get our punch, and let's see what we can pull off here. There we go. Okay, so with that now, we've got our punch in here holding our spring in. So I'm going to put my hand over the top to keep that spring from flying out too far. Ooh. And it did hit. There it is. Okay, so here's our trigger return spring. Here's that pin that we just popped out. Now, we're not going to end up reusing this pin. We're going to end up using a floating pin in here. But I'm going to put these to the side, and let's go ahead and pull out our trigger assembly. Now the trigger is going to come right out the top. Now, we are going to pull this trigger apart. This pin right here is not captured, so let's go ahead and pop that apart so that we don't lose that pin. Now we can see we've got our trigger here. I'm going to pull that off. Okay, let's go ahead and toss the trigger away. Now this is going to end up getting polished and cleaned up, and that's going to help us drop that trigger pull even more. So let's go ahead and set this up to the side. I'm going to set this up with a hammer spur, which is also going to be getting some work done to it. And I believe we only have one thing left, and that's the magazine release spring. So let's go ahead and... So what we're going to be doing is, we're going to be removing this screw. This spring is going to come up and out the top, and then that should allow us to remove the magazine release. So let's go ahead and break this screw loose. Now this screw, from what I understand, is in here pretty tight, so, and I was misled. That thing was barely in there. I think it'll be getting some blue Loctite when I put everything back together. So there's our screw. Set that aside. Now I'm going to use my screwdriver. Put my screwdriver up in here. We're going to pry these springs out. Okay, so watch out for this one because it's going to try to go everywhere when you pull it out. So there's that first horseshoe spring. Now we can pull the magazine release spring out by pulling it up and out the top. There's that one. And now you can see the magazine release is just going to slide right out the side. And that is it, guys. That is a fully stripped down SP01 frame. Holy crap, guys. It's been a day, and I just came down to kind of finish up this video, and I just noticed that this thing is not 100% stripped. So inside here, this is the front lock block, and here is the little spring that retains the locking pin. So we gotta get this thing out. So I did figure out really quick, we can take one of these little tools here, and there's a hole in the backside here where you can push through this little pin, and once that comes out, I think that spring will pop right out. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, there it was. So it just clicked. Now I'm going to put my finger here because I have a feeling that once that pin is removed, this spring is going to pop up. Maybe we need something to push this down with. Let's get a little screwdriver in here. Now let's try getting this pin out. Holy crud. Let's try this guy instead. There we go. Now I should be able to rotate this up and out. There we go. Now we're completely stripped. There is nothing else in this thing. It is ready to go for Cerakote and for me to start getting work done on those other pieces. Now I forgot to mention at the beginning, so the stock trigger pull on this thing ended up being 10 pounds 9 ounces for the double action and 5 pounds 1 ounce for the single action. We're looking to get those numbers down underneath 8 pounds for the double action and down underneath 3.5 pounds for the single action. It should be doable with very little effort, but a couple of the things that we're going to do to get that, in addition to replacing the parts, is, as I said, we're going to polish some of these internal components. The finish on these is a relatively rough finish. There's a couple of polish spots here, but we are going to buff this entire thing up, as well as this, while we pull this hammer apart. And actually, while we're at it, let's go ahead and break this down, because we need to pull this apart anyway, and right now the kids are up, so I can go ahead and beat things and not have to be concerned with waking them up. So let's go ahead and set our frame aside. Let's get our hammer and our starter punch and find a nice small hole that we can put this over. Let me look really quick now. Now these are peened in, similar to how the sear was peened into the frame. So this is going to take quite a bit of hammering to get these pins out. But we need these pins out because we're going to end up reusing this hammer strut. Both the disconnector here and the hammer are going to be replaced. So we're not really concerned with those, but we need this strut back out. So let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, so that's one out. Let's go ahead and grab a smaller punch and get that the rest of the way out. Okay, there's our disconnector. Let's go ahead and toss that over into our parts bin. Now let's get the hammer out. Okay, and get our smaller punch. Get that tapped the rest of the way out. And there we go. So now we've got our hammer strut here. These two pieces are going to be polished intensely. You can actually see on the strut here where the spring's rubbing up against it. We're going to polish this all the way up. And then our trigger bar here is going to get a high polish across the entire thing as well. Okay, so here's our old hammer. That is pretty much trash now. So let's go ahead and toss that to the side. Here's our pins. So our pins were peened. These are kind of ruined now. We will have to peen our new pins when we put those back. So set those to the side. And that's it, guys. We are officially done with the disassembly. Now, a couple of takeaways that I've got. First of all, definitely invest in this tool from Cajun Gunworks. This is part of their decocker disassembly kit. And the spot where this thing helps a lot is with those peened in portions. Now, like if I had used my little punch here, which is the appropriate size punch to punch those through, this thing would have bent immediately. But the starter punch that they send you is amazing. So definitely invest in that. Secondly, when you're removing the sear cage, if you're trying to keep it all in one piece, I would highly suggest making sure that when you install the slave pin, you don't accidentally go too far, because if you go too far with this, you're not getting it put back in. So there's that as well. Otherwise, you end up with this nasty horribleness of parts. Okay, so that's it, guys. That now is how you completely strip an SP01 frame. Now, the next time you see this guy, it's not going to be this color. In the meantime, we're going to be doing some polishing on some parts, and we're going to be putting everything else together in addition to the top side. So that's it for this time. Go ahead and keep a lookout for all of the upcoming videos that are going to come along after this one. Remember, if you found this video useful, go ahead and like and subscribe down below. I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.